I want to present an invocation to Obatala or Orisanla, as he is also called. Orisanla is a deity from the Orisa tradition of Yoruba land, a tradition that has spread to a good part of the world, particularly the Americas. Why is Orisanla important in the scheme of ideas, images, and concepts that are available to humanity? Orisanla is significant because he embodies in a distinctive, in a unique manner, the idea of the holy. To borrow the title of Rudolf Otto's famous book on the essence of religion. In speaking of the holy in relation to Obatala, I refer primarily to the fact that Obatala is described as he who wakes in white, he who sleeps in white, the mighty one. White in that context represents purity. In its most fundamental form, as beautifully described in Bolaji Idowu's Olodumare, God in Yoruba belief. That concept of white, of purity, as represented by his white robes, is dramatized, at least in the older days, by a young woman every morning would take a pot to the stream before it is disturbed by any other person and fetch clear water from that stream for Obatala's shrine. That water at the shrine is meant to represent the purity of his being. It may also be said to dramatize, to evoke the idea of nourishment, of a primal form that is central to human and all terrestrial existence. And this idea of primal nurturing, of clarity, of transparency of being. Water so clear you can see the bottom when you look from the top. No dirt, nothing impeding your view. Those concepts of purity, of transparency, of ultimate honesty, steadfastness are embodied in the being of Obatala. All of this together, purity, nurturing, are embodied in the idea of holiness. That holiness is emblematized, symbolized by Obatala's white. His white garments as the Lord who wakes in white, who sleeps in white, who rises in white, the mighty one. That white in turn represents a level of being that encapsulates, that brings together the idea of purity, of the transparent in terms of being free of distortions. Taking that idea further into the concept of the nurturing of being enabled by water, in this instance of one of the primal symbols of this deity. And in bringing together the idea of primal nurturing and of purity, we encapsulate from one perspective the idea of the holy. The holy here being something that issues from the ground of being, from the very source of existence, and constitutes that which configures all forms in existence as their core. An encounter with this radiant essence is not common. It may be encountered in unique natural locations where the presence of the whole is concentrated as an act of nature. Certain forests, groves, and other natural spaces demonstrate this quality, which is palpable regardless of whether or not one believes in such ideas. Such a presence may also be demonstrated in spaces of worship where people have carried out in honesty an effort to relate to that transcends the immediate, that transcends the act of survival, that goes beyond to address questions of the ultimacy that envelops existence and which cannot be pierced by the mere act of trying to reason into understanding, but is best understood through reverence. So, the white robes of Obatala embody this complex of ideas in the simple image of white cloth. Beyond this basic interpretation of the concept of the holy as emblematized by the white robes of this deity, Awufalokun Fatumbi elaborates on other possibilities of understanding of the meaning of this color. How does he put it? Fatumbi, whose Fatumbi being his initiatic name, but his given name at birth being David Wilson, describes this whiteness not only in terms of purity, not only in terms of nurturing, but in relation to the character of the color white in light as encapsulating all colors, as bringing the various colors of the spectrum into itself. Along those lines, therefore, he states that one may see the white robe of Obatala as representing the totality of all possibilities of consciousness in the cosmos at various levels of being. He anchors this idea, this interpretation, on the animistic universe of Orisa tradition, in which the cosmos is permeated by a force known as Ashe, a force that enables being and becoming, a force as the primary motive factor that enables transformation. A force that is the ground of existence as a concrete form, and a form that undergoes change with time. Along with enabling existence and transformation, this force may not be described simply in terms of energy as is understood by science, because energy in the sense of science is different or is not related to consciousness. But this force embraces the nature of consciousness and imbues various forms in existence with consciousness, including natural forms, plants, inanimate forms, and also enables the human being to concentrate the power of consciousness in inanimate forms. A similar idea emerges in Chinese thought in the key force symbolized by water that nourishes the cosmos, enables transformation. Ideas along these lines occur in various cultures. In the Orisa context and in other animistic cultures in Africa, all over the world, to which this philosophy is related, the idea of consciousness at various levels of being is fundamental. And along those lines, Fatumbi interprets the white robe of Obatala in relation to white light. A light that encapsulates, embodies, embraces all colors of the spectrum, and therefore brings into itself all possibilities of consciousness, all possibilities of being, as a primary manifestation from Olodumare. The origin of the cosmos as understood in one school of Orisa cosmology. Fatumbi goes further and relates the white light in terms of which he interprets Orisanla's robes to the matrix of energy that emerged according to scientific conceptions at the beginning of the universe, when a massive explosion emerged through which the cosmos as we know it came into being, bringing together the idea that Orisanla is understood in the Orisa cosmos as a primary manifestation of Olodumare, who may be understood as the pot, the immensity from which all emerges. Odu being understood from one interpretation as representing a pot, a massive concavity, in this case, a concavity which constitutes the bottomless depth of being. So, from within this formlessness, this immensity, this primordial depth, there is projected a beam of light, of white light, understood as Orisanla. Orisanla meaning the large, the mighty, the great, or the supreme Orisa. An interpretation of primordial emergence that is given concrete dramatic form in the story of how the Orisa came into existence, of how one day Obatala was at rest in his home, sunning himself, when his slave Atunda, for what reason nobody knows, rolled a massive rock onto the resting deity and smashed him to pieces. From the eruption of the primordial form of the primal one emerged the various Orisa. Many interpretations may be given to this narrative, but at the center of it all is that from one emerged multiplicity. From one Orisa emerged the others, understood as ultimately infinite in number. And if the Orisa may be understood in the insightful interpretation of Susan Wenger as each one being a perspective from which one may view the cosmos, the Orisa may be seen, therefore, as the totality of perspectives, the infinite number of possibilities, the unfolding panorama of perspectives, of vantage points from which one may approach the cosmos. And as Wenger puts it further, that the totality of these vantage points is Olodumare, the ultimacy that may be contemplated but not encapsulated by the mind. So, Orisanla may be described as an emanation from that ultimacy. The white light represented by his white robes, embodying the totality of existence, subsumed within a single essence. Just as all existence may be understood as a unified form, ultimately integrated in terms of various forces that enable coherence, that enable the cosmos to exist. As a correlative whole. So, in trying, therefore, to relate to Orisanla, one is making an effort to identify oneself with this body of ideas. And what better way than to integrate them into a personification, into a human-like embodiment in terms of an entity that demonstrates physical characteristics of a human being. Is this entity an independent existence? Is this entity a human creation? Are ideas of ultimate being, of Olodumare, of an ultimate source of existence, do they have value beyond human speculation? Does such an ultimacy exist? I would think that at the present stage of human development, those questions cannot be answered definitely by anybody. You may answer them for yourself, but you cannot answer them for others. Everybody has to answer the question for themselves. And it is difficult. I don't even know if it is. I think it may be possible. I think it is possible, but it's certainly difficult to answer the question. I have not answered the question. I have sought for years. I have not answered it. I still seek the answers. And part of the efforts of seeking is methods of meditation and invocation. And even if one does not find, if one does not come face to face with the manifestations of what these ideas suggest, I have experienced the fact that certain very interesting mental states and even experiences in your physical world do emerge in relation to reflecting upon, to practicing the ideas related to these beliefs. Does one need to believe them in their totality? No. I would think, personally, what I do, I practice to some degree what the English thinker Samuel Coleridge calls the willing suspension of disbelief that constitutes poetic truth. Aristotle, in the famous Poetics, sums up most magnificently this form of willing suspension, where he describes his mental processes through which we allow ourselves to get carried away in watching a dramatic performance. You know it is not real. You know they are acting. But because the story dramatizes ideas, attitudes which are real to you, because the artist draws necessarily upon the human universe, no matter how fantastic his ideas may be, they are drawn ultimately from what is possible to imagine as a human being. And what can be imagined to some degree has its roots in what has been experienced. That being so, you allow yourself to be moved by the experience. In fact, you are moved regardless of your own will. And after it all ends, You feel a sense of pain, a sense of joy, a sense of fulfillment. As Aristotle puts it, you may even feel a sense of purgation, that you have been taken to a crescent of emotion. And eventually, when the drama is over, that emotion is cleansed. Then you leave the theater or the film a little different from when you entered that place, because you have been enriched by a new experience. I think one can approach religious ideas along similar lines. I think the notion that uncritical belief is vital to religion is a mistake. Faith is a great power, is a source of knowledge. Faith being the acknowledgement of the truth of something, even if you cannot prove that truth, even to yourself. It can lead you to perceive the truth. But faith, there are different kinds of faith and gradations in the development of faith. One kind is the kind I'm describing, where, let's call it the faith of the actor, or the faith of the person watching the film. The faith of make-believe. Imagine it is real, at least for that moment. Then after you've finished, you let it go. The mind is very powerful. And what you feed it with is planted in its soil, and it grows. Whether you believe in it or not is neither here nor there in the long run, long as you have fed it to the mind. So, I would suggest that if, for example, you want to meditate, reflect on these ideas, you may consider a meditation on and an invocation of Orisanla. Ideas of purity, of nourishing, of holiness, of encapsulation of the totality of being. And I want to suggest one method of going about it. This method is adapted from Western occultism, specifically from the great book by Israel Regardie titled The Tree of Life and Studying Magic. The other day, however, I also stumbled across a similar technique in Hinduism and Buddhism. In the Western tradition, as described by Regardie, it is known as assumption of God form, where you assume the form of the deity. You imagine that you are the deity. You superimpose the form of the deity upon your own form. According to the Wikipedia article, I think on the Buddhist practice or the Buddhist school of Vajrayana, this technique is known as deity yoga, where you assume the form of the deity. According to that article, in this tradition, this technique is seen as developing rapid development and cultivation of spiritual powers, and therefore to be handled with a lot of delicacy. I will hold, therefore, that in using this kind of method, one should understand very well the ideas, the concepts, the images as subsumed in the deities you are dealing with, so that you are able to understand if they represent what you really want, so that when, and not if, because I expect that these practices have results of one kind or another, and that when the results are demonstrated, you understand them and can manage them. Orisanla, however, is a very let me say uncomplicated deity. Profound but uncomplicated. Although the significant idea expressed by Dion Fortune, an English occultist, to the effect that the divine forms, the deities, all have an opposite side. That every aspect in existence has an opposite side. A similar idea is expressed in Igbo cosmology that states that where one thing stands, another thing stands beside it. Therefore, if Orisanla represents purity, honesty, totality, can these qualities not be expressed in an unbalanced or extreme manner? The possibility of a lack of balance, or pursuing these possibilities to the extreme, represents the other side of the deity. Therefore, if you are invoking such qualities into yourself, you must be prepared when these qualities are being expressed, or when you express them, to make sure you manage them in a discerning manner, that you don't take things to extreme, or there was a way I put it a few minutes ago, I don't remember it exactly now, but the central idea is the idea of balance. There is a very beautiful chant in an initiation ritual in the Western school of the Golden Dawn that sums up this idea. An idea beautifully expressed, or it seems to distill this idea from the Jewish school of the Kabbalah, which is based fundamentally on the idea of the unity of opposites. And this chant states, if I may remember parts of it, that uncontrolled power is cruelty. Uncontrolled mercy is weakness. So as the Greeks will put it, from what I've understood, nothing in excess. There's a need for balance. So, the way I would approach an Orisanla meditation and invocation in this context is to operate in terms of total total external and internal silence. I will not vocalize, nor will I speak to myself in my mind. Why? I want to concentrate my relationship with the idea symbolized by the person of Orisanla. I want to move from the expression of ideas in words to the vocation of ideas in terms of visual symbols, and from there to formlessness. Thereby distilling the essence of those ideas. Words are priceless, but it's also useful to go beyond them. Images encapsulate much. It is also useful to go beyond them. So, we have spoken at some length what Orisanla implies. We shall now move beyond words into images, from images into silence. In the course of the invocation, because I am dramatizing it before an anticipated audience, I will vocalize at the climax of the ritual. But I think that such vocalization might not be indispensable, even though in the Orisa tradition, in the Hindu tradition and others, there are elaborate theories about the value of vocal expression as being a fundamental vehicle for creative force. So, we begin as usual with silence. You purify yourself through silence. In silence, you allow the world to drop away. You allow your mind to achieve rest. Master of the venerable presence, you enter into me, your face resting in mine, your arms resting in mine, sitting in my body as I sit, your hand aligned with mine, the radiant glow of your heart beating in the palpitations of my own heart, the beam of light that radiates from this heart into the cosmos, radiating through my heart into the infinite. Into infinity. Orisanla. 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 Orisanla.